Do we have too much government?
We need to put people ahead of corporate profits.
This system is so lopsided. This threat is a real threat to democracy.
And I think that's really important. That's something we haven't been doing in this country for a long time.
Where do you start? What do you do? How do you do it?
Access to Democracy and other Eagan community television programming is supported by Thomson Reuters, makers of Westlaw Next and based in Eagan. Through Westlaw Next and other innovative online services, Thomson Reuters is the world's leading source of intelligent information for businesses and professionals. Online at thomsonreuters.com. And by U.S. Federal Credit Union, the member-owned financial institution offering service, value, and experience you can trust to the greater Twin Cities community.
Welcome. We return with Access to Democracy. We return with a guest who's been here previously several times, but not recently, Rebecca Otto, and welcome back, who is the Minnesota State Auditor, and we'll talk a lot about what you do, who is now finishing her second term. She's been the auditor since 2007, and will be running again for re-election in 2014. And she's currently president of the National State Auditors Association, elected by her peers throughout the country. Other than that, she lives in a very unique wind and solar powered home with her husband Sean, who's been on this program also, is a screenwriter and a scientist, really, and your son.
And our son, who went to college.
Who is off to college.
Yeah.
Where is he?
Hamlin. So he's not far, but he's not at home, so I miss that daily interaction.
Yeah. So you're an empty nester, really.
I really am, all of a sudden.
All of a sudden.
Yeah.
Well, you oversee in the auditor's department really a $20 billion expenditure by local governments. Is that a fair statement?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Tell us how you do that.
We do it, really it's through financial and compliance audits of most of the counties, cities of the first class. We do it through collecting information, analyzing it, and reporting it out. Lots of financial information on our cities, our counties, our townships, even special taxing districts. We educate. Part of oversight is educating, helping our local officials to understand how to avoid pitfalls when being stewards of public funds, understanding the laws they need to follow when spending money, contracting laws. And we do it sometimes through investigations.
So you actually do a lot of auditing of municipal books throughout the state, of all sizes of municipalities, and investigations.
And investigations sometimes. Now, the good news in Minnesota is that we tend to be above average. And we really
That's what Garrison Keeler tells us.
Well, all the men are good looking and all the women are strong, and all of our children are above average. But in government, we're also above average. And I have that perspective, being the president of the National State Auditors Association. In Minnesota, even our state statutes in terms of how we form government and everything else, we're proactive in our thinking in terms of making sure we had good oversight built in and accountability. And so we tend to have good things going on. Once in a while something goes wrong. When that occurs, local officials have to report to our office to let us know. We do investigations. We don't do all of them because sometimes private firms do it, sometimes law enforcement does it, and sometimes maybe even like the BCA or the FBI.
You don't do the prosecution if there's any...
No, that would go to the county attorney normally.
Any wrongdoing that violates a statute.
Right, so the county attorneys determine if something criminal has occurred and if they're going to try to prosecute that. But we do sometimes do that forensic work for them, and when we do the forensic work, typically people end up paying restitution and or getting some sort of a sentence. So the good news is that serves as a deterrent. The staff in the office are, bar none, just fabulous people.
Now, how big a staff do you have for really what amounts to $20 billion a year that flows through the state to municipalities?
It's between 110 and 115 staff, so it's a fairly small staff considering the size of the money that's being spent. But again, our system's quite efficient, so the public can report to us if they think something's gone wrong, but local officials are required to report to us if they have any evidence of something going wrong. Private CPA firms who audit many of the entities we don't audit also are required to report to us by law if they find evidence of mishandling of public funds or assets. So we have a neat system. We have lots of eyes out there, but luckily we don't have a lot of bad things happening because we try to empower these local officials and all the employees within government to understand, red flags, how to properly segregate duties. It's kind of that, auditing talk and accounting talk, but education's critical, and I've always taken this proactive, preventative approach with our local officials to help them be the best steward of public funds as possible.
Actually lead a lot of seminars and forums to educate officials, because officials change from term to term, and there are new people handling the money in the municipalities, and they have to be trained, and so that's one of the things your office does as well.
Yes, we do. Yes,
and
we do.
You have pretty much a career staff. It's not a political staff as such. It's a career-oriented staff.
They're very apolitical. We really keep that out of the office, and these are professionals. These are CPAs. These are attorneys, and finance. People that have studied finance and accounting in school. And yes, so we have those professionals, and they do the training. We have people that sometimes do the work of 5 people in our office that know what they're doing. We have to have a highly professional, highly skilled staff in order to provide effective oversight. You always have to be ahead of the people that are trying to do not good. You know what I mean? We have to be smarter and better, and we leverage all of our different expertises within the office to provide that really strong oversight. So I'm really proud of the people that I get to work with.
Now, one of the things I didn't realize until recently, when I was doing a little research for this interview, that you also hold sway over lobbyists who deal with government.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah, well, so by state law, we're required, our office annually publishes a report on local government lobbying expenditures. So when local governments, want lobbying activity done on their behalf, it's either be a contract lobbyist that they hire. It can be through an association, like a local government association. There's a couple different models, or they're actual employees that go out and lobby. That has to be transparent, and so they have to report to our office any expenditures, and then we report it out to the public. Media is always very interested in the lobbying report.
We're talking about millions of dollars throughout the state that municipalities and organizations pay to lobbyists. Why would they do that?
Well, they'd probably be best to explain that. I think generally, from what I've heard from local officials when they get interviewed by the media when we issue the report, is they're trying to get something done, sometimes quite often at the legislature, whether it be impacting local government aid, impacting maybe a bonding bill. Sometimes cities really want to, or cities, counties want something to end up in a bonding bill at the legislature, and so they'll have someone go and do that work for them. If the legislature is looking at doing major policy changes around a type of local government entity, they sometimes want someone to have a seat at the table for them. And so our laws allow for this, and our office at least provides that transparency for the public. So that they know what their local governments are spending, and it's all on our website. If they want to know, they can look it up under reports and data and lobbying. So it's fascinating.
So they can see which city hired who. It doesn't necessarily tell them for what, but it could raise curiosity among the taxpayers in a particular area. Why did we hire a lobbyist, and why did we spend X number of dollars for a lobbyist?
Yes.
Your office also has sway over pension funds. So tell us what you do with regard to pension funds, which has obviously been in the news a lot lately.
Yep. So our office oversees about a little over 700 what we call volunteer fire relief associations. Again, this is in state statute. And these little fire relief associations, some of them are fairly large, they pay out a service pension to our mostly volunteer firefighting system, okay? We do have some salaried, but we have quite a few volunteer. And so what we do is the state, if these fire reliefs do their annual reporting to us and get audits if they're required to get an audit done and do all their due diligence, our office certifies them for something called fire state aid. The state will give them a chunk of money to put into that service pension fund. And so we do the certification, we do the oversight. When they're paying out these service pensions, part of our job in certifying them for fire state aid is to make sure they paid out the correct amount.
What about police pension funds? Do you have anything to do with that, or is that handled separately?
Well, I'm on the Public Employee Retirement Association board, or what we refer to as the PARA board, and we have a police and fire fund within PARA. And so that's my interaction more with the police.
And some cities do have paid firefighters.
You know, for firefighters.
Yes.
Absolutely. And when they have paid firefighters, typically their pension's going to be a part of PARA.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're talking about a lot of different arms. Now, you were a legislator before you became auditor. You really have had an interesting career because you taught for a while. And then you became a legislator. One of the things you did is you got a bipartisan group together to talk about balancing the budget, which we certainly had trouble with in this state until Governor Dayton took over. I'm not being political here, I'm stating a fact. We were in debt. That debt has practically been reduced to zero. And how did you work with other legislators from the other side of the aisle to get them to work on a balanced budget?
What I wanted to do was have an honest conversation, because there's always going to be rhetoric. And sometimes the public gets very confused and frustrated by rhetoric. And we'd had back in, 2003, there was all this rhetoric around no new taxes, and I was looking at the numbers, and I was talking to people who really, really got this information, and as I was working to learn the state budget, which is very difficult. And you can say no new taxes, but if you have expenditures like public safety, whatever, maybe your roads, important things the government does, and your revenues are falling short, you can cut. But anyway, what basically they were doing was they were cutting in a way that people were being charged fees and, higher tuition, in our colleges, more fees in the schools, more fees for all kinds of things at the local government level. So I was looking at the taxpayer's perspective in
That was
terms of...
Governor Palente's trick.
Yeah.
We won't raise taxes, but we'll just call it fees and hit people with that. Hello, it's the same money that you have to pay, no matter what you call it.
Right. And, they would cut aid to local governments, and then the local governments were quite often forced to raise their property taxes. Now, I'll tell you, cities have worked very hard to decrease expenditures. Many of them have done a very good job. They've found efficiencies when everything got so tight for about 10 years. It was a long ride, a long haul, I'll call it. And so some good things have happened in government when things get tight, and you really, whether it be sharing resources, sharing personnel with other entities. So we've gotten smarter in Minnesota. We always have been, but we're even better, and we're upping our game using technology.
Well, we became more nonpartisan during that period rather than partisan, and we see on a state level how it really impacted our legislature currently, and how it's changed with both houses in control of the same party with the governor. And certainly on a national level, we see it every day with the embarrassment that's going on in Washington with a House of Representatives that is just ignorant, or even worse than that, calculating to spit on the oath that they took and act against it. Or a Mitch McConnell who says his only job is to make sure that Obama was a one-term president. He didn't succeed in that, so now they want to make him fail at everything. Even yesterday, two very qualified people were nominated for important posts by the president, and they just said no for no reason, not on the qualifications, but because Obama put them up. That destroys government.
And that's rough politics. It's I love the job that I'm in and I am so honored to serve Minnesotans from this position. And I really don't have to be political in my job, and I prefer not to be. I've tried to be very nonpartisan, to work with all sides. When I was in the House, you got to come together and try to figure out solutions. There were some, when I was in the legislature back then, when we had a big deficit, one of the big ones that we started with, which was, let's have an honest conversation. Let's really look at what our priorities are, and then just adjust the budget accordingly. And, can we sacrifice certain things or not? As a state auditor now, if lawmakers have issues with something going on in their community, I help both sides. It doesn't matter, or I guess we probably have Democrats, Republicans, sometimes you'll have an independent. And I don't know that there's any Greens in the legislature right now, but it's all about getting the people's work done, and that's what they really appreciate. And so I'm just kind of wondering in the next election at the federal level, in those U.S. House seats, if there won't be an adjustment, because in Minnesota there certainly was. Had a shutdown, people don't like that, especially here, because we're better than that.
We certainly don't want government to shut down.
No. And it creates issues, and it reminds people what government does for us, because it's easy to get disconnected. And what I really try to do from my position is help people understand what our local governments do. And when they have questions and they contact the office, we try to cut the red tape, help them understand, get them the resources they need.
Government shutdown generally costs more than anything that it achieves.
Exactly, and that's true. I don't think people begin to have, the public might, and it's understandable they wouldn't understand, the havoc that it wreaks. Just preparing for the shutdown, communicating with all the folks that you work with, telling them what may or may not happen, you don't know how long. I know that we prepared for that in my office when the state was going to shut down. The stress that it causes for the staff, they haven't done anything wrong. They're working really hard, and we have professionals in our office. So it's...
and they're not political. These are people who are truly public servants.
They show up to work every day, and they work really hard. And I'll tell you, the people in the OSA work so hard every day, take great pride in their work, could work anywhere else for perhaps more money. But they're really dedicated. They understand the importance of good government, good, transparent, accountable, and efficient government. And so we're really lucky in Minnesota to have the folks that we do.
Now, you got an award from the League of Minnesota Cities in 2011. That means that the League of Cities recognized you for a particular award of excellence. It's one of many that you have gotten, but which, by the way, are available, I think, on the website, if not certainly under your name. Two very prestigious awards. The other one was the Excellence and Accountability Award for your Best Practices Review, and that came from the National Auditors Association. So that's recognition by your peers of something outstanding. What is the Best Practices Review?
So what our office does is we issue best practices reviews, which you could pick a topic. It could be in contracting. It can be, this happened to be reducing energy costs in local government. When the economy was in such bad shape, in local governments, they were trying to make things work. They were trying to cut expenditures. Your overhead costs are one area that you can look at to try to cut. I was in business, and so when times are tough, you try to keep those overhead costs down. Anything you can cut. Well, energy. Energy usage, it costs money. And so local governments, many of them wanted to make investments in reducing their energy costs. We wanted to help them find out the steps to take, no matter what they were doing, whether it was doing an energy audit and replacing their lighting, all the way to building a LEED certified building, or even installing perhaps something that would generate energy like a wind generator, solar panels. And in that, not only did we give them kind of the recognized, steps to best practices for the industry, regardless of how big that project was, from start to finish, from the energy audit all the way out until monitoring and measuring if you're actually getting the results that you were told you would, to the resources, to the national resources in terms of if you wanted to do more research. We had case studies on different local governments doing all these different neat things, small to very large. And then the pots of money, where could they find money? Could they get their hands on grants? Could they apply for things? And what's really great is it was a very popular report. We actually got a statewide conference organized around it. And because what these local government folks like to do is talk to each other, so we connected them to each other, so they can share resources.
What I started to say is you really practice what you preach, and you were there first because you and your husband, Sean, built your own home, and it is a wind and solar powered home. Now tell us how that came about.
Well, we're pretty fiscally conservative people, and so, but we also we really worry about the next generation, so there was a couple different things that were driving us, and it can be expensive to heat your home in Minnesota, and we were in a unique position that we wanted to build a home that was easy on the pocketbook, easy on the environment, and could kind of make a statement. And so we had to figure out how many pennies we had to spend, and when you do your own labor, you can save almost half the cost of your home. And my husband designed it. He drew the blueprints. It was too big to clean, so we shrunk it down. We measured our furniture and said, how much space do we really need? But anyway, we found a wind generator that had been used as a demo, so we got that fairly inexpensively. We got a used tower, got that certified by an engineer. You know, we put in, so what we are is we're passive solar heating, so lots of glass on the south side. We're earth bermed on the north. That helps insulate you from the winter, the cold in the winter, warm in the summer. We are airtight construction, mechanical ventilation. We can do solar cooling in the summertime. We have ceiling fans in our house over beds, you know, in all the rooms, which helps cool you as well. We have a special wood burning unit that is fairly low pollution, but we get a lot of heat out of. And we recently, like 2-3 years ago, we installed a geothermal heating and cooling system to back up our solar and our wood if we need it. Because we used to have a little, regular little tiny furnace, and it kind of wore out. And we've been buying propane, pre-buy propane, and one year my husband said, wow, it's going to cost so much, let's check into the geothermal. We did. We got it. Paid off in 3 years. Can't tell you how much I love it.
Cheaper.
Oh, yeah, yeah. So, and our wind generator was paid off in 10 years. You know, all the special glass that we put in, the super insulation, we're super insulated, that was paid off in a year. So for me, it's always that proactive, preventative approach, which I pretty much exercise everywhere, and the fairly conservative approach in terms of let's get it right in the first place, you know. And people
And in the long run, it saves a lot of money.
Of course it does. And you know, even I serve on the Minnesota Housing Finance Agency Board, and we're there to make sure that affordable housing is built, you know, good, safe, affordable housing for veterans, families,
We are
seniors.
going to have a gentleman from, I think it's Mooley Engineering, who's going to be in here in a few weeks, and he deals with solar power.
Oh, yeah.
And solar, and they manufacture, I believe, right here in Minnesota, and it should be an interesting conversation that I'm looking forward to.
Always. Yeah, but I mean, even when we build affordable housing, or we help to have that happen with our partners, you know, the developers in Minnesota, the banks, the nonprofits that housing finance assists, that we make sure that that housing is truly affordable when it's built new, making sure that it's efficient, right? You know, that we're insulating it properly and that we are trying to save energy. So again, it's all this stuff adds up over time. So I like good government, and I like efficient, effective everything.
And you carry that over into the office.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now, you issue review letters when red flags surface. One surfaced in Pine County not too long ago. What was that?
Oh my gracious. Okay, now you have to pull that out of my,
Something about the buying 2 fire engines,
it could be around,
misusing funds that they got.
oh gracious. Are you sure it was recent?
Well, I thought it was recent, within the last couple of years, anyway.
So, well, let me tell you generally, let's say a resident from community says, you know, I think they didn't do something quite right around some fire engines, or didn't do something quite right around, we follow up. Sometimes it's just a call to the entity, and we find out that what they did was okay.
They receive money for a specific purpose and they use it for something else, something like that.
That happens, right, and so we make sure they're doing it within compliance with the law. So sometimes things happen that aren't quite right, don't quite fit the law, but no one's going to go to jail. But what we do is we will write a letter and say, and it can be all kinds of things, Alan.
That's
There's
the
so
review
many.
letter?
Those are the review letters, where it's not something we may refer to the county but it's something that might not have been quite right. And it can be around purchasing of vehicles. We've had them before where they don't get bids because it's over a certain price. They try to give it to a local business, but state law will kind of dictate what they can and can't do, or if they're using restricted funds that should have been spent on something else. There's all kinds of things that come up. Sometimes there's conflict of interest that occur where you might have somebody serving on a city council, county commissioner, who may have a financial interest in a project, and maybe they should be abstaining from their votes. And there's all these steps local governments have to take and these officials have to take if the conflict of interest may exist.
So if the Twins were a municipality and all of a sudden they went to Mauer Chevrolet for all their cars, it might raise a question.
Right. If someone's going to experience a financial gain over something they have control over and they can vote, that's an issue. We get a lot of calls. It's really interesting. There are things that don't pass the public smell test, but are legal. We get a lot of those calls. And I always tell local officials, if there's any way the public, if this wouldn't pass the public smell test, be as transparent as you can. Make sure you're following those laws. If you have to file, if you have to file an affidavit with your local government saying, on this one I've got an issue, and then the local government passes a resolution, and so you're really being transparent about
Because
even a
people do pay
perceived
attention
conflict. Oh,
when,
yes.
when it affects their pocketbooks.
Absolutely.
We see that now with the Viking Stadium on a state level.
Yes.
And the furor that has created, which doesn't affect your office, I don't think.
No, but again, it's that transparency piece. The public really appreciates transparency as much as you can, and being accountable as well. So, but we are the office that you can contact if you believe something's gone wrong, someone's misusing funds, and we're the place. We're there for the taxpayers.
You send your investigators out, some of whom are attorneys, and get to the bottom of it.
Yes, and they're very, very good.
Yeah. Now you also have jurisdiction over the fire departments. Is that basically because of the pension situation?
Typically, yeah, fire departments typically are part of city government, but we also have independent nonprofit firefighting corporations. We've got special districts that provide fire services. So there's many forms, but yeah, local government. They're usually some form of political subdivision. And a city fire department is part of a city, and we have jurisdiction over them. But the fire reliefs really drive a lot of that. If on our website, when you find things referring to fire departments, it's financial in nature, and we're trying to make sure that everyone's doing things just right with the finances.
And also these TIF districts, tax, what is it?
Tax increment financing.
Yeah. You have jurisdiction over them also.
Yes, we do. Extraordinarily technical. The laws are very complicated, but our state allows local governments, especially cities, but our development authority is something called the ability to use tax increment financing. It's tax money, and so our office allows that program to exist because we provide the oversight. We make sure no one's abusing it. And
that's where somebody gets a tax break because maybe they want to relocate a business into your area or something like that.
Well, there's rules. It has to pass the but-for test. But basically, if let's say a city wants to do has a blighted property, and they want to make it great, and they can't get it to go but for the use of tax increment finance, they start out with that base level of property taxes. And then a developer may come in and do something neat. Maybe they'll do a mall or something. And there may need to be infrastructure improvements around the streets, the lights, whatever else.
We have that going on right here in Egan at the present time.
Sure. And
with the new mall that's going in. One other thing that we have going on at the present time is the fact that we're down to our last 30 seconds.
Oh, my gracious.
And we still have things to talk about. So you're going to have to come back.
I would be my pleasure.
And we've been talking with Rebecca Otto, who is our Minnesota State Auditor, completing her second term in office, announced that she is running for her third term. So we will see you during 2014 and come back and tell us more. And thank you.
Thank you, Alan.